Aaron, we are live streaming now. Okay. Well, hello, Facebook. If you're just now joining us, welcome. I didn't realize we were going to be coming on so quick. Welcome to Live from the Oasis. So happy to be here with you again. We just finished praying in our group. We're going to pray now as we begin to study God's word, asking for him to open our eyes and our understanding so that we can, as we look into his word, we can be taught by his spirit. So Lord, you said that I will send you the spirit of truth and that he will guide you into all truth. Lord, we pray this morning as we open your word that you will lead us and guide us into all truth, that you will give us your heart, that you will give us your mind, that you would help us to see through your eyes how we are to look at life. May we have your mind. May we be of one mind with the Spirit so that we can walk in the Spirit and glorify you through the fruit that we produce. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Okay. If you got your Bibles, I'd like you to open to the book of Genesis, chapter 1. As we are really starting to wind down this series that we've been doing, the overarching series that we're doing is called Keeping It in Context. By the way, we're going to be renaming the CCTD TV YouTube channel because that name is just so hard to say. So we're going to be calling it, I believe at this point, we're going to be calling it, well, it's going to be labeled KIC TV. What does KIC stand for? Keeping it in context. So we're going to be, now the reason I just don't call it Keeping It in Context, I found out there's at least 2 other YouTube channels already called Keeping It in Context by guys who are teaching the Bible. They've been up for about a year. And I went, man, I had this name like 2 years ago. I should have went ahead and did it. But I thought we're going to just call it KIC TV. So that when we get ready to study in context, I could just say, okay, let's kick it. KIC, let's kick it. Yeah, I think it's funny. My wife just looked at me when I said that. All right. But Lord willing, that's what we're going to be renaming it. So I'll let you know when we do that. I have to go in and change the name. But it'll be a little bit easier than trying to say CC, TD, TV. It was just difficult. Now it'll just be KIC TV. All right. Genesis chapter 1. And we're, like I said, we're going to be winding down. I think there's one more message I'm going to be doing in this series on success and prosperity, a kingdom perspective. I'd like to know if you've been watching this and following this, how has this been blessing you? Let me know in the comment section how it has impacted you. If you've gotten a lot out of this, that just blesses me to know that. Like I said, I think there's one more message that I'm going to be doing. And then we're going to be moving into, I believe, we're going to be talking about women and the place of women in the church and in the home. So I think I'm going to call it, tentatively, I'm working with the title of A Woman's Place. We're going to be talking about women in the church and women at home and in the church. And we're going to be looking at various topics where that is concerned, that over the course of studying this for the past, I think almost 3 years now, that it is quite controversial. But we're going to be going into a lot of things. So if you've had questions about women, especially questions about women submitting. So we're going to be getting a little bit into marriage where that's concerned. We'll be talking about husbands and wives, but especially the whole idea of women submitting. We're going to be talking about women in ministry. Are women allowed to teach men? What about when Paul says, I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to exercise authority or to usurp authority or to have authority over a man? What does the Bible say? Are women allowed to be pastors? Are women allowed to be elders in the church? What about these scriptures that seem to speak against that? What about the scriptures that seem to speak against women even speaking, where it says a woman is to be silent and ask her husband questions at home? We are going to be looking at that. We're going to be looking at things like, as a woman, are you supposed to be under the authority? Are you supposed to have a covering? You know, so people sometimes talking about we all got to be under a covering, and the woman has to have a covering over her, and her covering is her husband. We're going to be looking at this. So we're going to be looking at all of these things and looking at what did they mean in context. We're going to keep it in context. So the next series that we'll be looking at, Lord willing, is looking at these passages that deal with women, women in home, women in ministry, and we will be endeavoring to keep it in context. So if you have questions about that, as I'm saying this, go ahead and write your questions about, hey, Mike, are you going to be covering, and write your question in the comment section. And for those of you in the Zoom room, same thing, write your questions. You can send them to me privately, and I'll see it. Yeah, that's probably something I'm going to be covering. And if not, I may look at it and go, oh yeah, I've got to make sure I covered that. Okay. All right. Genesis chapter 1. We're going to be looking at verse 20 actually in Genesis chapter 1. Then it said, It says, then God said, let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures. Let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens. So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded, according to their kind. Every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters in the earth, and let birds multiply on the earth. So the evening and the morning were the fifth day. And then God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth, each according to its kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth according to its kind, cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. All right, so I read all that to say something that we have been studying for quite some time, and is this. God has designed his creation to prosper. He's designed his creation to succeed. It's really part of our created design to, and this is the word I've been using a lot, to flourish. Creation is designed to flourish. And I'm using flourish as a synonym for succeed and prosper. So creation, all of creation, and you and I are part of creation, we are designed to flourish, to prosper, to succeed. We are designed to fulfill the potential that God has put within us. And this is how I've been defining success, prosperity. It is that the potential that God has put within creation, that potential is being fulfilled. That's what the idea of being blessed. That which is blessed is that which is able to fulfill its potential. And so we have been made, all of creation has been made, it's been designed to prosper, to fulfill. So when we've been asking the question, well, does God want us to prosper? Does God want us to succeed in life? Does God want us to flourish? The answer is yes, he designed us to do so. And what we've seen throughout over the year, almost 2 years of this study, is that creation's fulfillment of its potential happens primarily through us, through you and I, as those created in the image and the likeness of God. Creation fulfills its potential through our influence. Creation fulfills this potential through how you and I, how we live and how we interact with creation, whether that is how we interact with one another, whether it's how we interact with our children, whether it's how we interact with our businesses. As I've been saying over and over, as we are, so our world will be. So the way that you and I live and interact with the world around us, that is going to determine whether or not creation, the world around us, is fulfilling its potential. So it happens primarily through us because God made us, human beings, to rule over the created order. So it is going to flourish because of how we relate to it. Now, here's a problem. What happened is that as we know, Genesis chapter 3, man's sin in the garden threw a monkey wrench into God's original plan. So even though we are designed to flourish, creation is designed to flourish, we are designed to facilitate the flourishing of creation. That plan, as it was originally designed, had a monkey wrench thrown into it. Man's sin created an interruption of God's plan for his creation. It didn't stop it, but it created an interruption, or it created a detour from the original plan as God designed it. If you look at Genesis chapter 3, and we're going to look at verse 17, Genesis 3 and verse 17. And we know that God, after the man and the woman sinned in the garden, God came in verse 17 and said to Adam, because you have heeded the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. So we see here that man's sin brought about a curse. It brought about a limitation. Things would not function as they were originally designed to function. And this is what we're seeing in Genesis chapter 3, that things will no longer function from this point on as God originally intended them to be. Paul also speaks this to us in Romans chapter 8. If you go to Romans chapter 8, Paul, in writing to the Romans chapter 8, we're going to look at verse 18. And he says this in Romans 8:18, "For I consider that the suffering of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed in us. For the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility." And this is what we read in Genesis chapter 3, the curse, the futility. Creation was subject to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope. Because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pangs together until now. Not only that, but we also, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body. So Romans chapter 8 and verse 18 through 23 tells us that because of Adam's sin, there was death introduced into the world. There was a curse that was introduced into the world, and it opened the door to suffering, which is why all of creation, including us, we groan. We are not experiencing life or existence as God originally intended in its fullness. There is a restriction, there is a futility, there is suffering, there is groaning. So all of creation groans. Life, and it's because life is not what it was originally designed to be. So instead of shalom, instead of well-being, we experience now ill-being. Instead of just prosperity around the world for everyone, there is poverty. In many places, where rather than there being freedom, there is oppression, there is enslavement. And this is because of what happened in the garden. That was the start of it, and introduced suffering into the world. So there's poverty rather than prosperity. There is death rather than life. There is sickness and disease rather than health. There is unanswered prayer rather than answered prayer. These are the things that we suffer with. These are the things that we deal with. There is suffering in the world. There's suffering in our present, in our personal world, and there's suffering in the world around us, the larger outside world. So there's suffering that we experience, and then there is suffering in the outside world. Jesus in John chapter 16, verse 33 said this, "These things I've spoken unto you, that in me you might have peace. In this world, you will have tribulation." One translation says you will have trials, in the Amplified Bible, trials, distress, frustration. This is what we experience. Jesus said you're going to experience in this world. In me, he said, you'll have peace. You'll have shalom. But in the world, you're going to experience suffering. You're going to experience difficulties. You're going to experience hardships. That's in this world. Now, one day, all suffering, all tears will be done away with permanently. One day, we're looking forward to that. Revelation chapter 21, verse 4 says, "And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away." So one day, all suffering will be done away with completely, but not yet. Okay, we still have to deal with suffering in this life, suffering in different ways, different expressions, different manifestations of it. Now, the suffering that you and I experience, sometimes this suffering is due to our own actions. Would you agree with that? There are times we go through stuff and it's our own fault. It's because of decisions that we have made. Now, I say this not as condemnation, but really as illumination, really as empowerment. Sometimes, because the reason I say that empowerment, because if we own what we did, often we can change it, but we got to own it first. So sometimes we need to recognize that some of our suffering, some of our hardships is due to our own decisions and our own actions. I remember years ago when Karen and I were first married, our first year of marriage, when we didn't have any kids, and it was just she and I'm lying in bed one morning and I'm complaining about my life. I'm about 24 years old. I'm complaining about my life. And I'm just quietly complaining, not out loud, but I'm just saying to myself, and I was not satisfied with certain things in my life. And I was sitting and I was lying there thinking, I woke up, I was lying there thinking, man, if I hadn't followed this person's advice, if I hadn't listened to this person, if I hadn't did what they told me to do and gone down this path that they told me I was taking, things would be better. My life would be so much better. I should have listened to them, man. I listened to them and I was complaining. And the Lord spoke to me in that moment. And what he said to me was, your life is a reflection of the decisions that you have made. If you want a better life, then make better decisions. And he began to show me, yes, they gave you that advice. Yes, they gave you that counsel, but you chose to follow it. I always tell people, had to be God, I wouldn't be telling myself this. So I chose to make certain decisions. Yes, people gave me advice. Yes, people gave me counsel, but I was the one that chose to follow it. And by the way, some of the counsel and advice that people were giving me, they were not doing it maliciously. They were not trying to hurt me. They thought this is what was best. But when it comes down to it, I chose to follow it. And when I embraced that, and what the Lord was showing me, and one of the scriptures that he gave me was Deuteronomy 30:19, where God speaks to the people of Israel. And he says, I've said through Moses, I set before you life and death, blessing, cursing, therefore choose life. And that verse became for Karen and I, the principle of that verse, that you always have a choice. That became a life verse, a foundational verse for Karen and I. It is one that we, to this day, still live our lives by. But my point here was that some of the things that I was experiencing up to that point, it was due to my own actions. It was due to my own decision. So some of the suffering that we go through, it's because of what we have decided to do. Our decisions, our actions. Now, to own that is to begin to be able to turn your life around. Some of the suffering we go through is due to the actions of others. In other words, there are things that people do to us. There are things that we were not expecting. There are betrayals that we experience. People not following through on their promises. People not doing what they said that they were going to do. People just being mean-spirited, or they're operating out of the wounds of their own life, and they impact us. And because of it, we suffer. Okay, so sometimes we suffer due to the actions of others. And then there's another area of suffering, and that is sometimes we suffer and we don't really see any good reason. It's not necessarily due to the actions of others. It's not necessarily something we've done. We just experience something. And this is when somebody might experience something in their body and they really haven't done anything in particular. And I know that, that we got to eat right, we got to exercise, but there are people who've done all of that and still will experience bad things in their body. They will experience sickness and disease. And for those of you that know Karen and I and our family, we're big advocates for exercise, eating right, taking responsibility for your health. But I'm aware of the fact that you can do that, and then there are still things that can happen. There are things you can do right in business. You do everything right, and yet things might fail. Things don't turn out the way that you were expecting. Somebody might have a fire and it burns down. You see no rhyme or reason. And this is when we kind of go, God, what's going on? There are times we suffer really for, as far as our perspective is concerned, no good reason. So these are the different ways we experience suffering. Here's a question I want to ask, though, and this is what we're going to be talking about today. There is suffering in the world. We suffer. Other people suffer. Is suffering, and it's part of life. Suffering is a part of life, but is suffering antithetical to success, prosperity, and flourishing? Is when we talk about prosperity, when we talk about success, as we've been talking about it, from what I call a kingdom perspective, is it merely an American gospel? Is it merely an American teaching that only works in America when we talk about these things? Can you really truly only flourish if you're living in America or in North America or in places where you've got freedom, you can make these type of decisions, and there's already some measure of prosperity there? Is that the only way that you can actually prosper? Here's the other question. How can we speak of flourishing and prospering when we ourselves may be suffering? Or how can we talk about that when others are suffering? Is it antithetical? Is it wrong for us to talk about it, even to pursue it, when there's so much suffering in the world? So today I want to talk about, I've labeled this success, prosperity, and suffering, flourishing through difficulties, because of the fact, and here's the idea that we're going to be seeing, is that they do not have to be opposed to one another. It doesn't have to be either or. Both can take place at the same time, but there's a few things we need to understand and we need to get right where this is concerned. So first of all, this is what I want to talk about when we talk about success, prosperity, suffering, flourishing through difficulties, because we all go through difficulties. I like something that I heard John Maxwell say one time. He said, I got problems, you got problems. All God's children got problems, okay? We all have problems. We all go through stuff. There are things, there are times you go through things unexpectedly. I know in 2019, we had several things hit us unexpectedly. We were not looking for it, and boom, it was like we were blindsided by it, okay? Several things in 2019. So it happens to everyone. Does that mean that flourishing, prosperity becomes irrelevant? And I would say no, but there's a few things we need to understand properly and correctly. So I hope this will help you today, especially if you're going through a difficult time. I want this to be an encouragement to your heart to keep seeking to flourish, to keep seeking to succeed, to keep seeking to prosper. So first thing I want to look at is this. We need to realize that there are different types of success and prosperity, at least 4 different types of success and prosperity. And you say, Mike, what are you talking about? In a way, I've kind of talked about it as we've gone through the series, but as I was meditating a few weeks ago about this, I said, there's a way of looking at this as I was in preparation for this message that I knew was coming. I said, there's a way of looking at this where you can categorize success and prosperity into 4 different categories. There's 4 different ways we can look at it. So here are the 4 different types. Now, understand, I am the one, I created these categories myself. I'm just letting you know that I'm putting these categories in it, and it's a way of being able to explain how we can deal with suffering and still pursue success, prosperity, flourishing, and why we need to, even when we are going through difficult times. But we need to understand first these 4 different types. So number 1, the first one that I want to talk about, and these are in order because one leads to the other with the exception of the last one I'm going to mention. Number 1, the first type of success and prosperity or flourishing is what I'm calling kingdom success. Kingdom success. I could also call this divine success or divine prosperity or divine flourishing. What is this? This is the success and the prosperity or the flourishing of the king. This is God's success. This is God's flourishing. This is God succeeding at what he wants to do. This is basically God's will being fulfilled. It is God's sovereign will being fulfilled, and it is God's written will being fulfilled. That's what I mean by kingdom success or divine success or divine flourishing. God's will being done. His sovereign will, which means the things that he decides that we may or may not know about, he may make known to us what he is going to do, or he may not. It's his sovereign will. So Isaiah chapter 46, verses 9 through 10 says this: remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times, things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. This is what I mean by kingdom success or divine success and prosperity, divine flourishing. It is God fulfilling his will. It is his counsel, his sovereign will being done. And I would put underneath that his written will as revealed in his word, that being done, because where God's will is being done, that's where God's kingdom is. Divine success, divine prosperity, kingdom success, that's the other way you can refer to it. It's encapsulated in Jesus' word when he tells us to pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. So the place where God's will is being done, that's where God is ruling and reigning. Where God is ruling and reigning, that means his plans, his purposes, his agendas are being fulfilled. That can again be his sovereign will as well as his written will when we, his people, do his will. By the way, Jesus tells us to pray for the success of the will of God, to pray for that we're to join with God in seeking for his divine success to happen, for his purposes, his plans to be done in the earth. So that's one type of success and flourishing and prosperity. It is kingdom success or divine success. It is God's purposes, his agenda being done. Number 2 is what I'm calling personal success or virtuous success. Personal success or virtuous success, or personal prosperity, virtuous prosperity, or personal flourishing and virtuous flourishing. Keep in mind that I'm using these terms as synonyms. So personal success or virtuous success, what is it? This is where we are being what God has created us to be. We're doing what he has created us to do. This is what we've talked about throughout this series. So this is the second type of success. This is when you and I are walking and living virtuously. We are living and we're walking and living in love and joy and peace and wisdom, righteousness, courage, self-control. We are being what he designed and created us to be. So personal or virtuous success is a way of living. It's not so much about accomplishing things. It's not so much about accomplishing material goals. That can be a part of it, as we'll see in a moment, but it's about a way of life that develops and that releases our God-given potential according to God's will. Now, when you and I are walking in virtuous success, we're being what he created us to be, we're doing what he's created us to do, that can have a positive influence and impact on the world around you. As I've often said, as you are, so your world will be. So if you're walking in virtuous success, that can have, you're walking in wisdom, you're walking in love, you're walking in self-control, that can have a positive impact. It's going to cause you to realize more of your potential, and it is realizing more of your potential. But when you're doing that, those virtues, as you live them out, as we've studied in the past, it can have a positive impact on the world around you. If you're exercising self-control where your body is concerned, that's going to have a positive impact on your health. If you're walking in wisdom, if you're walking in wisdom where your life is concerned, where your business is concerned, you're walking in wisdom, you're walking in practical ways of getting things done. You see the best possible course of action in order to achieve a particular outcome. That's walking in wisdom. That's one aspect of wisdom. Then that can have a positive impact, let's say, upon your business. Okay. Courage. Remember, courage is another virtue. If you're walking in courage, courage expands you. Courage allows you to move forward and do things that you normally would not do. Okay. So the virtues that God calls us to walk in, they're not just calling us to be, and they just don't enable us to be nice people. It does that, but enables us to live life in such a way that we not only flourish, but we cause the world around us to flourish. So in a nutshell, when you are walking in virtuous success, what I'm calling virtuous success, you're being what God calls you to be, doing what God calls you to do, walking in the virtues. That's really walking and living in the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is love and joy and peace and goodness. It's generosity. All of these things not only cause you to flourish, but it impacts the world around you. Self-control is one of the fruit of the Spirit. Being content, being independent of what's going on around you, and being self-sufficient through Christ's sufficiency, that is also a virtue. And all of those things, when you walk in them, can have a positive impact, not only upon you, but upon the world around you. It's a life that you live, all right? Virtuous success, all right, or personal success. All right, number 3, personal success, virtuous success, having an impact on the world around you. It can lead to this next one that I'm calling earthly success, or I came up with this term last night and I thought, that's cool, creational success. Earthly success or creational success. Creational success. What's this? This is really success of the earth. This is really what everybody looks for, success of the earth. This is where we nurture and act as catalysts. Now, I want you to hear me carefully. This is where you and I are nurturing and we're acting as catalysts to release the potential of the created world around us. As those created in God's image and likeness, that is what you and I are called to do. We are called to nurture, to release, to promote the potential of creation around us. If you have a business, the potential in your business. If you are working with people, if you're leading people, you nurture and you release their potential. If you're raising children, you nurture and release their potential. This is what I'm calling creational or earthly success. This is when we cause the world to flourish under godly stewardship and godly care by living wisely, intentionally, righteously, courageously. So in other words, the virtuous success directly impacts the creational success. Creational success can flow from the personal success. You see how these ties together? Because personal success, virtuous success, flows from kingdom, divine success. In other words, as we're doing the will of God, we're going to live virtuously. As we're living virtuously, it can have a positive impact on the world around us. And by keep in mind, when I'm talking about living virtuously, I'm not just saying being a nice person. This is also, it's practical. It's being wise. See, you can be a nice person and not be wise and therefore not flourish. Okay. You can be a nice person and not be courageous. And so though you don't step out there, you don't take risks, you don't do certain things to make it happen. You could be a nice person and not be self-controlled. You could be a nice person and not be faithful, consistent, diligent in what you do. All of these things that are fruits of the Spirit, we're also told in the book of Proverbs that these are the things that causes life to flourish. So it's not, that's what I'm saying, it's beyond just being nice. It's living life in such a way that you cause the world around you to flourish. So when you and I are walking in creational success, it's because we are being godly stewards. We're caring for the world around us. And by the world around us, I mean those things that you touch and that you influence. So this can be people that you're in relationships with. It can be your business that you have, that you are the steward over. You are to be God's representative. You are to be God's steward over that. You are to be wise where your business is concerned. You are to be intentional where your business is concerned, setting goals, moving, looking at what can we do to expand this, to make this happen, to cause good to come from it. We're to be righteous in our dealings with other people. Does that make sense? So this is what I mean by earthly creational success. We're being good stewards. We're living in such a way that it releases the potential of that which we are stewards over. So this is where we can experience financial flourishing, prosperity, physical well-being, health. We can enjoy God's material good gifts and blessing. This is what I mean by creational or earthly success. Okay, that is a part of it. I said that from the very beginning, that when we talk about success, it's not just spiritual. And matter of fact, one of the things I said is that one of the difficulties with people, when people talk about success, is that they tend to limit it. Some people will only limit it to spiritual. Some people will only limit it to financial prosperity, and it's too limiting. We need to have an expanded view that I believe, as I'm talking about this, it includes all of it. Okay, so creational success. Let me say this about creational success also. This success, earthly or creational success, and the reason I'm saying earthly is because I wanted to understand that, as we've said in the beginning, success and prosperity, they're not bad things. And so material success is not antithetical to spiritual life and spiritual living. Okay, it's not, as we have seen. But this success, creational success or flourishing, benefits not only us, it benefits other people. We're going to be talking about this more next week. I believe the last lesson, I think it's the last lesson that I'm going to be giving next week on this series. We're going to call it good success versus bad success. We're going to look at what's good success, and then we're going to look at what's bad success. One of the things I can tell you right now is that biblical, earthly, creational success, it benefits not only you. The way God designs it is that it benefits not only you, but it also benefits others. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17 and 18 says this: command those who are rich in this present age not to be haughty, nor to trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, who gives us richly all things, including the material world, to enjoy. So notice God is the source of blessing, of material blessing, of material riches. But then he says, let them, those who have riches, do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to give, willing to share. What is the source of the material, earthly, creational blessing? God. Is it to benefit those to whom he gives it? Yes, but not only them, through them it's to benefit other people. So creational success, earthly success, the way God designed it, and if we're following his design, meaning that we're living according to divine success, divine flourishing, okay, doing his will, it's going to benefit us and it's going to benefit other people. Or to put it more in an active form, we get benefited, but we also benefit others. We are blessed, but we also bless others. And we do that on purpose. We do that intentionally. That's the way God designed earthly creational success to work, to function. The very last one. So we've covered what? 3 thus far. We've talked about kingdom or divine success. We've talked about personal or virtuous success. We've talked about earthly or creational success. The 4th one is the one you and I should have nothing to do with. And this is what I'm calling worldly or vicious success. Worldly or vicious prosperity. worldly or vicious flourishing. There is a dark side to flourishing. So we talk about virtuous success. This is vicious success. What is this success? What is this prosperity? What is this dark flourishing? This is achievement or accomplishment gained through vice, not virtue. It is achievement, it is accomplishment that is gained through vice, not virtue. It is motivated by greed, by covetousness, and it is self-centered. It uses deception, oppression, and exploitation of others to get what it wants, and it is also a way of living. And this is what we've covered when we first started this and we started getting into the economics of the first century world, the economics of the Greco-Roman world. And what we saw was this, that when the Bible speaks against acquiring wealth, it is not speaking against wealth. It's speaking about acquiring wealth, acquiring blessing in a way that is illegitimate, in a way that's contrary to the will of God. That's what we study. And so when the Bible is speaking against the rich, it is speaking against those who have used deception, oppression, and exploitation to gather more for themselves at the expense of others. This is worldly or vicious success or prosperity or flourishing. And this is not the type of flourishing, success, or prosperity that you and I are to be involved in at all. We are not to be involved in it at all. Micah chapter 2, verse 1 and 2 kind of gives a really good encapsulation and picture and image of vicious success and prosperity. This is what it says, Micah chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. Woe to those who devise iniquity and work out evil on their beds. Now the word devise there in Hebrew, chashav, a verb, it is the idea of imagining, of planning. Woe to those who devise, who plan, who imagine. One way we can think of it is who meditates iniquity. These are people who are imagining and coming up with ways to do wrong, but it's a specific wrong in this context. They work out evil on their beds, in their minds, in their imagination. They're working out evil on their beds. At morning light, they practice it. Okay, so they were working out on their beds, imagining it, and then when the morning comes, they go out and do what they've imagined, what they have planned, what they've meditated upon. At morning light, they practice it because it is in the power of the hand. Now, what are they doing? Here, verse 2, they covet fields and take them by violence, also houses and seize them. So they oppress a man and his house, a man and his inheritance. Remember we said in the ancient world, wealth was primarily tied up with property, owning property. So this is someone who has decided that they're going to, through oppression, through deception, through violence, through exploitation of their neighbor, they're going to gather and gain more for themselves. This is worldly, vicious prosperity and flourishing. It happens with individuals. It happens with corporations. Let me say it like this, actually. People say, well, corporations are run by people. Corporations are run by people. A corporation is only as bad, a corporation is only as evil as the people who run it. So if you've got people who are figuring out how to get more by taking advantage of others, using exploitation, using violence, using lies and deceits, if they are doing that, that's evil. This is vicious prosperity. This is vicious success. So through oppression, through violence, through deception, you can flourish and get more. You can get more. You can maximize profits while leaving other people without. But it is wrong. It is vicious. It is not the kingdom way. It is not God's kingdom way of flourishing in life. Because remember we said before that kingdom prosperity, earthly creational prosperity, as God designs it, benefits not only you, but also others. Vicious success benefits only you. It only benefits you if you're operating in it because it is self-centered. Other people, you may say, well, we give them a little bit, but yeah, it's just a little bit. Maybe to keep them off of your, keep them satiated, keep them happy. We just give them just a little bit so they don't complain too much. That's wrong. And if you're a business person that does that, you're in the wrong. Okay, this is not the way to go. I'm speaking primarily to Christians. Listen, this even happens in churches. I've been listening to over the past month a podcast series called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. This is free. You can listen to it. It's a podcast. And it's been absolutely eye-opening. And it talks about a church known as Mars Hill. Actually, it ended up being several churches that was started by a pastor named Mark Driscoll. And it talks about basically it's a story of started off well and went really, really bad. And what I begin to see as I'm listening to this series is that it went from ministering to others. And then when they started to want to grow, they wanted to flourish. We were designed to grow and flourish, but they began to operate in ways. They began to operate in wisdom that was not according to the will of God, that was not according to God's way of creating flourishing. They began to operate in vicious success. They began to operate in vicious prosperity. And a lot of people got hurt. A lot of people were devastated. Some people walked away from their faith. And it was, and if you look at it if you look at it on the outside and just listen to some of the words, it was like, but we're doing this for God. But there were things that were being done that were vicious, that were wrong, that were contrary to the will of God, where people were devising iniquity and people were doing things that in some instances amounted to defrauding other people. Now, I say that not to focus on that, but to say that even in the church, even in churches where you have people who want to succeed in ministry, they want their ministry to grow. They want their ministry to flourish. They want to have a big ministry. Karen and I were talking about this yesterday, actually, because I was telling her about what I was reading, and we were talking about how God had dealt with us. And I remember when I was starting off young in ministry, we started our first church, Berean Christian Fellowship. And I remember getting out of the car one day, and I'm standing there in front of the church, getting ready to open up for our Friday night Bible study. And I'm looking at this beautiful window that had been created for us with our logo on it. The guy had painted it was absolutely beautiful. And I'm looking there and I'm admiring it. And I thought to myself, man, I sure will be glad when this becomes a success. And the Lord spoke to my heart and said, what makes you think it's not a success now? Only because we got like 2 or 3 people coming. That's why I was thinking, God, when it becomes a success, and success meant a lot of people coming, numbers. And the Lord just said, what makes you think it's not a success now? And I knew in that moment, I'm getting ready to get a lesson. And the Lord spoke to my heart. And one of the things he said to me very simply was this: these people are not here for you. You are here for them. They are not here for your self-aggrandizement so that people can clap and go, wow, look at what Mike has done. And that began a process of getting selfish ambition out of my heart, or another way of saying it, of redeeming that ambition to stir it so it becomes sanctified and godly. And it took a while. And I mean, talk about a few years. This wasn't an instant thing, because I didn't realize how ingrained there was in me of wanting to be a success according to a vicious standard and not a kingdom standard. Okay, so that's something that's I'm especially saying this to those of us who are ministers. We have to watch our hearts where that is concerned. I'm not saying this for us to be paranoid. I'm saying for us to be too, like Paul said, examine yourselves. We have to examine ourselves. Okay, so those are the 4 categories that I've identified. Number 1, kingdom or divine success. Number 2, personal or virtuous success. Number 3, earthly or creational success. Those are the ones we are to be pursuing. Worldly or vicious success, we're to stay away from it. So we're going to be talking more about this next week. So we are to pursue kingdom success, virtuous, creational success, and flourishing, never worldly or vicious success. Keep in mind, again, we're talking about success, prosperity, flourishing. What am I talking about? It's the promoting, it's the releasing, it's the nurturing and the development of God's goodness according to his will. So we're promoting the goodness of God. We're promoting the spread of his goodness, the expansion of his goodness, the expansion of his kingdom. That is the success that we are to be promoting, the kingdom, virtuous, and creational success. Those 3, they're interconnected with each other. They overlap each other. So as believers, we are to develop and nurture potential. We're to develop and nurture and spread God's goodness through and by operating in kingdom success, being submitted to God's will, and by virtuous success, operating in virtue. Okay. Now, if we're operating in God's kingdom success or divine success, meaning we're submitted to his will, we're doing his will, we're walking virtuously, this can lead to, and it can cause, earthly or creational success or prosperity or flourishing. So in other words, when you and I are being virtuous and we're walking in God's will, we can become catalysts for creational success. We become catalysts that promote and release and cause we facilitate the flourishing of the world around us when we walk in God's ways, when we walk in his kingdom success, when we walk in virtuous success. Again, those two overlap, okay? However, here's the thing I want to say. Kingdom success, divine success, virtuous success, while it does encompass creational success, it is not limited to creational success. Kingdom success, God's success, virtuous success encompasses creational success, but it is not limited to creational success. In other words, you and I can still flourish. We can still be prosperous. We can still be successful, meaning we're being what God wants us to be, doing what God wants us to do, walking and fulfilling the potential that he placed within us. We can be this even in the absence of earthly or creational success. To put it another way, we can prosper and we can flourish in the midst of our suffering and help others to flourish in their suffering. We can flourish even in the midst of suffering and help others to flourish even in the midst of their suffering. And again, think of flourishing as seeking, promoting, and the release, the expansion of God's goodness. Okay? All right, so let's talk about flourishing in suffering, flourishing in difficulties, both our own and where other people are concerned. So I'm going to share with you at least 6 things. You can think of them as principles, ideas we need to operate and function in. You can think of them as steps if you want. They're not necessarily steps like do this first, do this second, do this third. But it's some things that I've learned over the years that I've seen in the text that have served me well. And I hope they serve you well as too. So principle number one is we got to accept that suffering is a part of life. It's a part of your life. We've got to accept that. Not everything always works out in the way that we desire, that we plan, or that we pray for. Again, Jesus said, in this world, John 16:33, you will have tribulation. So we need to accept that. Not accepting this, being in denial about it, can leave us unprepared and quite vulnerable for when suffering and difficulties happen. Excuse me. We don't want to be afraid of suffering. We just want to accept that, listen, this is a part of our present life, of our present existence. Excuse me. If we accept the reality of suffering, that at times we will suffer, we will go through hard times, we will go through difficulties, this can, to a great degree, help us to prepare for it. Now, you won't ever be totally prepared for it because stuff happens unexpectedly, stuff that you never thought would happen can happen. But by accepting that that is a part of life can, to a degree, help us to prepare for it. Jesus said in John 16:33, again, in this world, you're going to have tribulation. But then he said, but be of good cheer. And that word means to be confident, be certain, be undaunted, because I've overcome the world. He says, in this world, in me, you have peace. In this world, you're going to have problems. You're going to have suffering. You're going to have hardships, but be of good cheer. In other words, he's saying, listen, suffering is going to happen. Prepare yourself for it. Prepare yourself and do things that can help you to deal more effectively with the suffering, with the hardships, with the problems, with the difficulties when they show up. The rest of the things I'm going to be sharing with you are things that you can do to help you to prepare. Okay? So number one, though, is accepting. This is the first part of really preparing. Accepting. Stuff is going to happen. Things are not always going to turn out the way you want. You are going to have some failures in life. I know we don't like to hear that, but it's going to happen. All your prayers will not be answered. We will pray for people to live and people will die. Now, and I say that not to discourage you from praying. I'm going to share with you something in a moment that I think is really important, but it's to be real about life. And all of us have experienced that. And a lot of people get discouraged and they can stop. And I know I have. There are times I've stopped praying because I just thought, what's the use? But when we accept, this is part of it. I was taking a walk the other day and I thought, you just got to accept this is part of it. This happens. Why? I don't always know. Anybody that tells you they know why, run. We don't always know why. We can ask God, we can question, but we don't always know why. But there are things we can do to prepare. Number two, so once we accept, second, another thing we can do is this. You want to cultivate and be in the habit of cultivating resourceful states of mind and emotions. You want to cultivate and you want to stay in the habit. I'll put it like that. You want to stay in the habit of cultivating states of mind and emotions like joy, like confidence, like, as we're going to talk about a little bit later, compassion, gratitude. You want to cultivate resourceful states of mind and emotion. Learning to cultivate resourceful states of mind and emotion can be crucial for dealing more effectively with seasons of difficulties and suffering. It can be very crucial for that. One of my favorite stories to tell is in 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 1 through 6. I won't turn there because of the time, but David, in that story, David returns home to his village, which is called Ziklag, and the Amalekites had attacked his village while he and the men were gone. They destroy the village, and they take all of the women and all of the children. So the men come back, everything is ruined, everything's burned down. They are devastated. And the men spoke of stoning David. The idea was, they were grieved. David, we hadn't been with you. We could have been here to protect our family. We were out there following you. So we're going to kill you. This is all your fault. The Bible says David was greatly afraid, but then it said that David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. He encouraged himself. He encouraged himself. It does not say, and the Lord came and encouraged David. That can happen. I've had that happen, but it says David encouraged himself in the midst of loss, in the midst of difficulty, in the midst of hardship, in the midst of suffering. David encouraged himself. This is why I said it is so crucial that you learn to get into the habit of cultivating resourceful states of mind and emotions. And the reason it's so important, because when David encouraged himself in the Lord, then it says, David said to the priest, bring me the ephod. He sought the Lord. He got a word from God, and God said, go and pursue. David said, should we pursue? God said, go and pursue, and you will recover all. And that's exactly what happened. But before any of that took place, it says David, in the midst of people talking about killing him, in the midst of devastation around him, he encouraged himself. He cultivated within himself a resourceful state of mind and emotion that enabled him to take more effective action. The purpose of cultivating resourceful states of mind and emotion is not to avoid your problem. It is not to avoid the suffering. It is not to pretend the suffering is not there. It is so you can deal with the suffering, deal with the difficulty, deal with the hardship more effectively. That's why you want to cultivate resourceful states of mind and emotions. So you can do something like joy. What does James tells us? James chapter 1, verse 2, count it all joy when you encounter temptations, tests, and trials. Why is joy so important? I call joy an optimizing emotion. Dr. Antonio Damasio, in his book, Looking for Spinoza, Joy, Sorrow, and the Feeling Brain, give you a little neuroscience here. He says this about joy. Joyous, quote, joyous states signify physiological coordination and smooth running of the operations of life. Joyous states are not only conducive to survival, but to survival with well-being. The states of joy create greater functional harmony and increase the power and the freedom to act. So joy is one of the states, and it's a fruit of the Spirit that we want to be able to cultivate. I find it significant that the sciences, the psychological sciences, the neuroscience, are emphasizing what the biblical text also emphasizes, that states of joy and other states are crucial to living and experiencing a life of flourishing. So if you want to flourish, you must cultivate resourceful states of mind and emotion. Go back through some of the lessons that we have covered. I'm going to be uploading more of those from last year to the which will be renamed the YouTube channel KIC TV. Kick It TV, but Keep It In Context TV. We will be uploading those. You can actually find them on my Facebook page. You have to scroll through it, but they are there. And we talk about how you can cultivate resourceful states of mind and emotion. You want to learn to do that. Okay. By the way, in the future, we're going to be doing some actual classes on this that you can sign up for that will directly speak to this. Okay. So principle number 2, cultivate resourceful states of mind and emotions. Number 3 is you want to seek, this is another important of mine that's really a favorite of mine, seek heaven's perspective about what you're going through. Seek heaven's perspective, God's perspective about what you're going through. In Numbers chapter 14, verse 24, God said this about Caleb. But my servant Caleb, because he had another spirit with him and has followed me fully, him will I bring into the land, and he shall possess it. God gave a promise to the people of Israel that he would give them the land. In Numbers chapter 13, he sent 12 spies to spy out the land. Those spies came back. 10 of the spies said, we can't do it. Caleb said, let's go up at once and possess it. We are well able to overcome it. The other 10 spies said, we can't do this. And later on, Joshua joined with Caleb and said, no, we can do this. God is with us. Caleb had a different mindset. He had a different perspective. The 10 spies says, there are giants in the land. But Caleb said, yeah, I know there's giants. Let's go up at once. We're well able to overcome it. Caleb had a mindset. He had a perspective that enabled him to follow God and obey him completely, even in the face of difficulties. What was the difficulty? Giants. But he had a mindset, a perspective that enabled him to follow God completely. We need this. I want you to go over to Matthew chapter 16. Matthew chapter 16. Let me read to you something, again, to see why the right mindset is so important. Matthew chapter 16. We're going to look at verse 21. Matthew chapter 16, verse 21. And this is when Jesus is talking to his disciples. And it says in verse 21, from that time, Jesus began to show to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem, suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and be raised the third day. And then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, far be it from you, Lord, this shall not happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me. Now here's the key. You are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of man. Now, what Peter stumbled here, Jesus said, you are an offense unto me. That means you are a stumbling block. Peter stumbled at what Jesus said, and thereby became himself a stumbling block. But why did he stumble at what Jesus said? Why was he rejecting what Jesus said? What was Jesus talking about? Suffering. Now, he's also talking about his resurrection, but he's talking about suffering. Remember, we said suffering is going to happen. Jesus said suffering was going to happen to him. Peter rejected this. Why? Jesus tells us in verse 23, you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of man. Peter did not have God's mind. He did not have God's perspective on what Jesus was saying. He had only and simply a human perspective. Or he needed to be like Caleb. He wasn't able to follow God fully because he didn't have God's perspective. He had a human perspective. In order for us to follow God fully, in order for us to keep going on, even in the face of suffering, in the face of difficulties, we need to have God's mind. We need to have God's perspective on what we are going through. So Peter was not able to do that because he didn't have God's perspective. Jesus said, you're minding the things which be of man, not the things which be of God. Let me give you an illustration of someone who in the midst of suffering, in the face of suffering, and in the midst of it, they were able to follow God fully. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Is this making sense? And I hope you're finding this helpful. Those of you in the Zoom room, I hope you're finding this helpful. 1 Corinthians. Is it 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians? Hang on. 2 Corinthians, I'm sorry. I know it's wrong here. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, look at verse 7. This is about Paul's thorn in the flesh. And I love this. It says in verse 7, lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly, I will rather boast in my infirmities so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then am I strong. So here Paul was dealing with a thorn in the flesh. Paul was dealing with suffering. Paul was dealing with hardships and difficulties. And yet in the midst of it, he still flourished. That's why I said flourishing is not limited to creational earthly success. It encompasses it, but it's not limited to it. Paul was experiencing personal, virtuous success, and he was flourishing. The power of God, the strength of Christ was being manifested in him. Now, here's the thing I want you to see. When Paul was experiencing this thorn in the flesh, he's experiencing these hardships from this thorn in the flesh, he goes to God and he says, please take this from me. Get rid of this. He didn't like it. God didn't rebuke him for praying that, by the way. God didn't say, what's wrong with you? You should just accept this suffering. God didn't rebuke him. What God said to him was, my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in weakness. And all of a sudden, Paul shifts and he says, most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. I take pleasure in infirmities. I take pleasures in necessities. What happened? Why did Paul change his response, the way he was now relating to his sufferings, the way he was now relating to his hardship? It was because he now had the mind of God about what he was going through. He had the divine perspective. He was operating in that divine success because he had the divine perspective, and now he was operating in personal virtuous success. So that's what I want to encourage you. When you're going through difficult times, when it is hard, it's like, what is going on? And you may even, like Paul, be crying out, take this from me. He said, I did it 3 times. If God doesn't take it away, pray and say, Lord, give me your mind, so I can mind what you are minding. I want to mind the things of God and not just look at this from a human perspective. Now, let me say this to you also, because sometimes we can get into this and go, well, I'm just going to get along, I'm going to go with God and listen to no one else. No, stay part of community. Sometimes God's perspective may come to you through someone else. Now, I'm not telling you that God can't tell you specifically or personally, but it may also come through someone else. In other words, God may use someone to speak to you. God may use someone to give you the wisdom that you need. The key is to believe God for the wisdom. If any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men liberally and upbraideth not. God gives wisdom in a variety of ways. He can speak it to your heart. Like when I said to you, I was complaining about my life, and the Lord spoke to me and said, your life is a reflection of the decisions that you have made. If you want a better life, make better decisions. That came to me personally. But there are times God has spoken to me through my wife. There are times God has spoken to me through my friends. There are times people have come to me and said, I believe the Lord told me to tell you this. So don't limit God on how he's going to bring to you his mind, his perspective. You just trust him for it and know he will give it to you. Because when you have God's mind, you're able to follow him more fully. It will encourage your heart. Okay, that's number 3. Number 4 is seeking virtuous and creational blessing enables you to bless and alleviate the suffering of others. Now, I'm shifting here from just how you deal with it, now being a blessing to other people in their sufferings. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 28 says this, let him who stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good. Remember I said that flourishing is about expanding or promoting, nurturing, expanding God's goodness. Let him who stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give to him who has need. Notice here what's taking place in Ephesians 4:28. The one who stole was formerly, if you're stealing from somebody, you're operating in vicious success, vicious prosperity. You are oppressing, you are gaining more for yourself at the expense of another. Paul says now, no, stop that. You're new creations. Begin to function in virtuous success. And he says, rather, what you should now do is work with your hands, which is creating creational blessing. Work with your hands what is good, so that you may have to give to someone who has need. So the one who was causing suffering by stealing from others now pursues virtue and virtuous living, and they become someone who alleviates the suffering of others. So this is why I said, even, we don't have to feel guilty. We don't have to feel bad. Yes, there are people who are suffering. But here's the thing. What you can do is work to create creational blessings, if it's appropriate for the situation, to alleviate. You can use that to alleviate the suffering of other people. Paul does this in Acts chapter 20. Turn there very quickly. Acts chapter 20. This makes sense? Acts chapter 20, let's look at verse 32. Acts chapter 20, verse 32. Paul says to the Ephesians, he's in Ephesus, getting ready to leave. He says in verse 32, so now, brethren, I commend you to God and to the word of his grace, which is able to build you up and give you an inheritance among all those who are sanctified. I have coveted no one silver or gold or apparel. Notice what he said. I have coveted, meaning I have not been seeking to get what belongs to others through exploitation or oppression. Paul is not operating in vicious worldly success. He said, I have coveted no one's silver or gold or apparel. Yes, you yourselves know that these hands, my hands, have provided for my necessities and for those who were with me. Remember I said creational success is designed by God to benefit not only you, but also others. So Paul says, my hands have provided for my necessities and for those who are with me. I have shown you in every way by laboring like this, that you must support the weak. And remember the words of the Lord Jesus that he said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. So Paul, through the work of his own hands, produced good. He produced creational blessing and flourishing and helped to alleviate the difficulties, the suffering of others. In verse 35, he exhorts the people to do the same. And he tells them that those who do what I've done, you are blessed. I've covered with you before that word blessed, makarios, in Greek. It refers to a state of flourishing. So Paul said, those who function like I did, those who are functioning in virtuous flourishing, those who are creating creational blessings and sharing it with others, you are in a state of flourishing. It's more blessed to give than to receive. When you are in a position of giving, you are in a state of flourishing. And notice it benefits not only you, it's benefiting other people. Paul was living in a state of flourishing. The Greeks would have called it eudaimonia. In Hebrew, it is ashrei. In Greek, is makarios. He is in a state of flourishing that benefits not only him, because he said, I work with my own hands for my own needs, but also to bless other people. So notice the two go together. Giving is a virtue. All right. He's walking in virtuous, he's living virtuously. He's walking in virtuous personal success that not only benefits him, it also benefits other people. All right. So seeking virtuous and creational blessing enables you to bless and alleviate the suffering of others. So even in times of difficulty, if you can, seek to be blessed, seek creational blessing, seek to create more. Understand it has a purpose, not only to benefit you, but to benefit other people. Number 5 is you want to be flexible in your faith. We got one more and then we're done. Be flexible in your faith. What do I mean by that? Turn to Daniel chapter 3. It's another very important principle. One that I was so glad to meditate upon this one. Is like, I needed to hear that. Daniel chapter 3. This is a story of the 3 Hebrew friends of David. Daniel. Daniel chapter 3. This was dealing with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We're going to look at verse 16. Now, if you remember the story, King Nebuchadnezzar created this idol of himself that he wanted everybody to fall down and worship. Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were not, we say Abednego, but it's Abednego. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They said, we're not going to bow. King said, if you don't bow, I'm going to throw you into a furnace. I'm going to burn you alive. What did they say? Verse 16 of Daniel chapter 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, that you're going to throw us into the fire, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. They are speaking with confidence. They are speaking with faith. They are saying, listen, what you said is what you said, but if you do this, know this, our God will deliver us from your hand. Confidence, faith in God. And then they said, verse 18, but if not, whoa, wait a minute. You just said God's going to do it. You just spoke with certainty. Are they reneging? No. They are confirming, they are affirming, they are declaring that they are faithful to God. But if not, if God doesn't deliver us, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. What are they saying? They were committed to believing God for their deliverance. They said, our God is well able to deliver us, and he will deliver us. But then they said, but if he doesn't, But if not, if it doesn't happen, we will not serve you. We will not serve your God. We will not bow down to your image. They were flexible. They were saying, listen, even if it doesn't happen, even if it doesn't turn out the way that we are believing God, it did. But they say, even if it doesn't happen the way we are planning, the way we are praying, the way we are desiring, even if it doesn't happen, we will not bow or serve your gods. In other words, we are going to be faithful to God no matter what. This is what I mean by flexible, because sometimes we can believe God and we can trust him. We say, God, I'm going to believe you. I'm going to do what Mark chapter 11, verse 22, 23, and 24 says. I'm going to believe that I receive. I'm not going to doubt in my heart. God, I believe you. And then it doesn't turn out the way we have prayed, the way we have desired, the way we've planned. And it could cause us to want to give up and quit. I have been there. I've never given up and walked away from God, but there are times I thought, and I have, it's like, what's the use of praying? Because God's going to do what he wants to do anyway. What I have learned over the years, and what I'm still learning, is to commit to being faithful no matter what. God, I believe you will do this. God, we trust you to heal this person from COVID. God, we trust you to raise them up. But there also needs to be in our heart, but even if you do not, I will still faithful to you, and I will worship you, and I will continue to serve you. I will not bow my knee to I will not bow my knee to unanswered prayer. I will not bow my knee to unfulfilled desire, that will be my God and determine my behavior. God, I will serve you no matter what. Now, this is why it's important to be able to cultivate resourceful emotions, resourceful states, because it can help you to remain faithful. These guys were flexible in their faith. There is like two sides of the same coin. On the one side, I'm committed, I'm moving forward with confidence, but I'm also able to say, but if it doesn't happen, I'm committed to you no matter what. I will remain faithful to you no matter what. Amen. All right, number 6, last one, and we're done. 6th principle is this, and it's weep with those who weep. We're talking about shifting from not just seeking to flourish ourselves, but seeking to help others to flourish as we flourish, okay? So keep in mind, because even as I'm talking about your flourishing yourself in the midst of difficulties, tests, and trial, it's always with the eye of being a catalyst to the use of God to help others to flourish. And one of the ways we could do this is to weep with those who weep. Romans 12:15 says, rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. It's the NIV version. This too is virtuous success. This too is flourishing. Not only just rejoicing with those who rejoice, but mourning with those who mourn. This is about operating in the virtue of compassion. We join with and we feel the pain of others. We hurt with them. We lament with them. We don't try to fix it. Sometimes it is not the time to fix it. I remember years ago, we had something happen with a very close friend of ours who was really like a member of the family. They experienced some really bad, tough betrayal. It was a betrayal of her marriage, betrayal of their family. And she was so hurt to the point, Karen and I had to go get them and bring them to our home. And the next day we were talking, and this is years ago, my desire to help this person, I was a little bit naive and insensitive. And I said, well, you want to make sure you forgive them. And it was just 24 hours later. It wasn't even a full 24 hours. And I was talking about forgiveness. And Karen just stopped me and said, with some irritation and upsetness in her voice, how can you talk about forgiveness at this point? And it shocked me, and she was right. What I needed to do in that moment is not try to move the person for forgiveness. Forgiveness is important. Unforgiveness can stop you from flourishing. Yes, it can. But there is a time when you need to weep and mourn. And this friend of ours at that point, and by the way, I did stop and I apologize. At that point, what she needed was for us not to try to fix it, not to try to seek reconciliation because of what happened, the nature of what happened. It needed to be a time of mourning, of lamenting, of us sitting with her, me sitting with her, just feeling her pain. So I'm thankful for my wife who corrected me in that moment. There are times we need to mourn with people and not try to fix it. We just need to be there with them and not try to say you need to do X, Y, and Z. That's why sometimes when people come to me now, because I've learned, I've gotten better, people come to me and they're struggling with forgiveness. And they'll say, I know, Mike, I need I know what you're going to tell me. I know what you're going to tell me, Mike. And they, by the way, they come to me, especially coaching clients. They're struggling with unforgiveness, and they'll come to me and they go, I heard you help people with this. Can you help me with this? I go, yes. And so we're meeting. They say, I know what you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me I need to forgive them so I can move on. I need to forgive them so I can heal. And I usually go, I'm not going to tell you that. They went, you're not? I go, no. They went, really? No. I said, what we're going to do first is, rather than saying, listen, you must forgive in order to heal, I take the opposite approach. I said, you need to heal, and then we'll move to forgiveness. But you need to heal first. We need to heal the hurt. We need to heal the pain. And that usually shocks. Most people usually say to me, you can do that? Because they've been taught all their life in Christianity, you can't heal until you forgive. By the way, there's actually no scripture that actually says that. Now, it is true, if you forgive, it will bring further healing. But it's also true, you can heal and then forgive. Okay, sometimes, and part of the healing process sometimes is simply sitting with someone. Now, usually when somebody comes to me for coaching, they usually are ready to move on. But I always check. I learned this from working with one of my mentors, Bob Boathammer, and I always check, are you ready to move on? How long has this been? Are you ready? Are you truly ready to forgive and move on from this? Because sometimes people are not. There are times I've just sat with people and just heard them because no one else has heard them. And they needed someone to heal them. But part of the healing process sometimes for people is just sitting with them, lamenting with them, crying with them, mourning with them, letting them cry out to God in hurt and in pain. And you just are being there with them. This is also flourishing, because when you do that, it helps them to begin to move towards flourishing. Okay. Sometimes it's not even saying anything. It's just being there. So being there for people, it's operating in the virtue of compassion. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 3 says this: continue to remember those in prison as if you were together with them in prison, and those who are mistreated as if you yourself were suffering. Let me read to you from this book, one of my favorite books. I know you're thinking, Mike, you say that about all the books you have. This is Perseverance and Gratitude, a socio-rhetorical commentary on the Epistle to the Hebrews by David De Silva. He says this about this verse, Hebrews chapter 13, that I just read to you. Let me read it to you again. Continue to remember those in prison as if you were together with them in prison, and those who are mistreated as if you yourselves were suffering. David De Silva says this and gives this commentary where this verse is concerned. The exhortation to remember those in prison and those being mistreated for their confession of faith in Jesus directs the hearer specifically to provide relief in the forms of material and emotional support to those believers who are experiencing the most pressure from outside of the group, outside of the Christian community. The kinship of Christians should lead the free believer to regard the suffering of another as his or her own suffering, and to alleviate them as wholeheartedly and bravely as one would relieve one's own distress. The author particularly wants to reinforce support for the marginalized, which is essential to maintaining group commitment among both those who are being targeted by society. Those who are being targeted by society, the latter, needs to see that their new family will never desert them in the time of need, but will rather be for one another the visible and active manifestation of the promise of God that follows in 13:5. In Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5, the writer of Hebrews quotes Joshua, I believe it's Joshua chapter 1, verse 5, that says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Actually, it literally says, I will never, never, never leave you nor forsake you. And what De Silva says here is that those who are being targeted, those who are being oppressed, those who are being persecuted, those who are going through suffering, they need to see that their new family will never desert them in their time of need, but would rather be for one another the visible and active manifestation of the promise of God that I will never leave you nor forsake you. So what am I saying here? As believers, we are to embody and represent God's promise, I will never leave you and forsake you. He says, remember those that are in prison. Remember those who are suffering. Being in prison they would suffer because people who were in prison as in the first century world, it was not the place of punishment. It was the holding place until they brought you to your punishment. Let me say it again. Prisons were not the place, it was not where you went for punishment. It was the place where they held you until your punishment. So you could be in prison and they may not give you food. They may not give you water. They wouldn't take care of you. Remember how Jesus talks about those who are righteous, that in that day he will say, I was in prison and you came and visited me. The idea of visiting is not just I go up to the prison and go, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. See you again in a month. The idea is I bring you what you need. I bring you food. I bring you water so that you can sustain life. Or as we're saying here, so even while in your suffering, we can alleviate your suffering and help you to flourish even while you're there. So it's the food, it's the emotional support. This is what we're supposed to do for brothers who are suffering. And as I read this, I thought about how important it is that we think about those who are suffering and who are in need. I know one of the members of our fellowship, Claudia Lynham, she does that. The work that she's doing it partly because the Lord told her and because of her heart for those who are suffering and who are in need. As I thought about this, I thought about people, Christians, fellow believers, sisters brothers and sisters around the world who are suffering, who are in communist regimes, who are some of them being sold into slavery. We need to remember them. Remember in this instance is not just simply, I call them to mind, is that I call them to mind and I act to alleviate their suffering. This is why you prospering, even in the midst of suffering or in the midst of other people suffering, is important, because and I'm talking about creational flourishing, creational prosperity. Why? Because it serves a purpose. The reason you have what you have, and if you've got extra, you've got surplus, it is to serve those who are suffering, those who are in need. That's why it is important for you to continue to prosper, for you to continue to flourish, because your flourishing is not just about you. Your flourishing is about helping those who are in need. And as I was reading and meditating upon this today, I thought to myself, you know what? Who else can we help? How can we help those in different countries who are undergoing persecution, who might be in need of Bibles, who might be in need of food, who might be in need of clothing? I've heard of groups and organizations that will purchase slaves so they can be set free. Now, they're not purchasing slaves, and so there are Christians who have done this, that they in other parts of the world, slavery is still going on. And so there are people who will band together, get the money together, pay for these people, quote, buy slaves, but it's for the purpose of setting them free. This is why our flourishing, even in the midst of difficulty, even in the midst of hardships, not necessarily our own, but others. We shouldn't feel guilty. It's like, oh, how can I be blessed when other people are still suffering? Because if you are blessed, if you're flourishing, you can alleviate the suffering of others. Does that make sense? Your flourishing, it's not just for you. Your virtue is flourishing, your kingdom flourishing, virtue is flourishing, creational flourishing. It's not just about you. It's also for others. That's the way God designed it. Now, one more thing. This principle of weep with those who weep also speaks to the importance of being in community with other believers, those who will support you in healthy ways and those that you can support in healthy ways. As we've seen in previous study, once again, God's design is that flourishing happens in and through community. So weeping with those who weep also speaks to us that we need to be in healthy communities where we can be encouraged and where we can encourage. Don't be afraid to reach out to others. This is why, as much as possible, and as far as it lies in you, you want to cultivate positive feelings and emotions. You want to be able to be blessed in a creational manner. You want to be able to have a flourishing and an abundance mentally and emotionally, and even financially. Why? So that you can be a catalyst and a facilitator of flourishing for others who may be in need. And as the Apostle Paul said, and we read this so many times, that at this time, Your abundance goes to meet their need, to alleviate their pain, their suffering, so that later on, their abundance will come to aid you. Again, this is how God has designed for community in his kingdom, for family in his kingdom to function and operate. Does that make sense? Last words here and we're done. We're a little bit over. Success, prosperity, flourishing does not become irrelevant in the face of suffering and difficulties. Doesn't become irrelevant. We need to operate in wisdom and recognize what's the type of flourishing that I need to pursue given our situation and circumstances. Sometimes it's not about the creational blessing. Sometimes it's just about being a virtuous person who sits with other people and displays compassion. And yet that compassion sometimes may manifest itself in bringing creational blessing to the needs of others. We just need the wisdom to know the difference sometimes. Suffering, whether it's our own or others, can be used as an opportunity to communicate God's goodness and to cause flourishing even more, not only for ourselves, but for other people. Suffering becomes an opportunity to image God. It becomes an opportunity to use what the enemy meant for evil. We can intentionally use it to manifest God's goodness. This is what God did in the story of Joseph. Joseph suffered. He suffered from his brother. He suffered from Potiphar's wife. He suffered from Pharaoh's cupbearer for getting him and not intervening on his behalf for 2 years. He suffered. But if you go back, you read the story, in the midst of the suffering, he prospered. The Bible said he prospered, not financially, but he was able to be a blessing to others. He was able to alleviate their pain and their suffering. He was able to facilitate flourishing around him, even though he was often in positions of suffering. He was a slave. He was a prisoner. And God used that to facilitate flourishing for an entire country. And later on, Joseph said to his brothers, you meant it for evil, but God meant it and intended it for good. So suffering is an opportunity for you and I, whether it's our own, especially when other people are concerned, is an opportunity to utilize what the enemy meant for evil. You and I can utilize it for good to affect flourishing in their life. So to end, what suffering teaches us, and it can teach us, is that our flourishing, whether it's virtuous flourishing, whether it's creational flourishing, it's not just for us, it's for others also. That is why it's important that we flourish even through difficult times. Amen. I hope this was a blessing for you. I hope you got something out of this. I know it was a lot. Go back and meditate over this again. But I want to encourage you, if you're going through difficult times, seek to flourish, especially for yourself personally. Seek to be virtuous, seek to cultivate positive emotions, seek to cultivate resourceful emotions, mind and emotions, so that you can keep going forward, cultivate and seek the mind of God to get his perspective, but also seek how can you be a blessing to facilitate flourishing and alleviate the suffering of those around you. God bless you. We are done for today. Lord willing, we will see you next week. And I plan to talk to you about good success and bad success. I think that'll be the last message in this series. So if you found this helpful, please share this with other people. If you found this helpful, let me know in the comment section for those of you watching on Facebook. And as I said before, God willing, we will see you next week. Thank you all for being with us. Lord bless you, and we will see you again. Bye-bye.